Baba's brother John, his main purpose was to keep Baba laughing. I'll just tell you a story. Once before the new life, Baba always wanted Mara to be taken care of. No special to him. He would tell people, I don't want Mara, especially after the accident in America, he would say, I don't want Mara to suffer anymore. It's her last lifetime. Just let her be comfortable. So they went to Mount Abu. Baba had must work there in that area, and Mount Abu was his station that summer, and from there he would take trips. It's quite exhausted during that whole summer. This is 1949, April, May. But before they went up there, Baba sent Baidu and his brother John up to find a good facility in the Mount Abu area. So they found something. Baba arrived. He asked Joe, did you find something nice? Yes, Baba, very nice. How's the facility for the women? Tell me about it. Beautiful, large, it's beautiful. And the main floor, the sitting room. There's the kitchen there, the dining room. There's a gathering room, a central hall upstairs. So this bedroom and that room. That bedroom is there, this room, so much room. Beautiful, perfect. That was really good. Thank you. And what about the men? A standing room for the men. Joel told me this. He said, just recently I went back to my old childhood school. It is still there, can you believe it? I went inside, same old building is there, same old looks. I went inside, same hallway is there. Could you believe it? I went down the hallway, my classroom from when I was a boy is still there. Would you believe it? Unbelievable. I went inside, same desk, same chairs, everything the same as when I was a boy. Would you believe it? I went to the cabinet there, opened the cabinet, the boy and girl inside kissing. I said, how dare you come out of there? I said, no, sir, this is my sister. Same old story. Can you believe it? He's another one of the characters, One of the 12 within was a joker also. It was a necessary role to play. These people who come with the avatar, whenever he comes, Baba gave that beautiful discourse that wasn't included in the first series of the discourses, but the seventh, what we call the seventh edition, it was included. That discourse was given by Baba in 1955. The original discourse has good explanations about the circle in general. Specifically, it comes from early discourses about the circle of a perfect master, 12 and 2 women. But he also includes some information about the avatar circle, 10 circles and 12 plus 2 women. The first circle being most significant pertaining to the avatar's personal form. Baba explained that each one of them represent a specific part of his body. And when the avatar is unveiled, made to know, to realize who he actually is, that veil of sanskars is lifted by the perfect masters. Those people, he said, are automatically in place. And he said, it is like a man who wakes up from deep sleep and suddenly becomes aware of his body. He doesn't have to think about it. All the parts of his body move naturally and automatically. And he said that is the way it is with the circle. They have a particular function. The succeeding circles are each related to this preceding circle. And on it goes, and through them, Baba said, he works directly for the universe. All of them are connected to humanity in different layers and stages. We can look at more photographs if you like, or we can answer questions. Yeah?
Are you looking at me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, the same theme, I wish you would tell them a little bit about Adi Kairani and that story I like so much.
Which one?
The one on our TV that year.
Oh, Walmart.
His strength, and that also, is that part of an marriage story too? I can't remember.
Yes.
Tell that story.
One year at Amartithi, I know, maybe it was 1978. There were some bikers who came from Vancouver or Seattle, somewhere northwest in America. Big guys, leather jackets. One guy and his sidekick, he came before Amartithi, and we had his personal agenda, which was that he was trying to get some traction by saying he was Mayor Baba's son. Okay. So he tried asserting a little bit, wasn't getting much traction. People tried to be nice with him. He wanted to have a special audience with Mara to inform her. The first incident was like this. He went to approach Mara, who is of course surrounded by the other women mindedly as the nucleus. She is there, and then the Western girls around her. And as this man approaches Mara, and they've been tipped off, of course, because all of the talk of the women are down there. As he tries to approach, Goher, who's probably half his height, throws an elbow into the guy and says, "Men are not permitted to approach Mara. Back off." So he backs away and he realizes he's not going to get exactly what he wants. Sometime, maybe the 30th, first day of Amartithi, maybe it was. Adi Kairani used to be the master of ceremonies, which he thought was a ludicrous term. What type of master is that? He's a master of ceremonies. At that time, the celebration was on what we call the Sabha Mandap, that stage opposite the Samadhi there. And Baba's chair would be placed there. And during the early part of the program, the man approached Adi and said, "Look, I had a dream, and in that dream, Mayor Baba came to me and told me that I was his son and that I should come here and sit on his chair." Without skipping a beat, Adi said, yes, I also had a dream, sir. And in that dream, Mayor Baba told me, if somebody comes here saying it is his son, I should give him a pen kick on his ass and get up! The guy was feeling a bit frustrated by this. By this point, his sidekick is starting to get an idea that this is not, you can't just push your way around here. There is really something here, and these people have deep conviction about it. That evening, Eric used to stay up 3 days to make sure nobody who came would miss the chance of greeting him and answering any questions they might have. So he would step through the night, and this guy was there, and Eric was talking to people, and this guy started making a few comments, snide remarks or whatever. Things went on like that. At one point, there was words exchanged, and Eric just told him, ultimately, "I tell you, by tomorrow you will be gone from this place." The guy and his friend, they went to speak on the Sabha Mandap. The next morning, Padre called us, 4 of us, Ted, Ellen, Eric, myself. He told each of us as we came, "There's some trouble out the hill. You will go up and remove those troublemakers." Okay, they say, "Yes, sir." We went up, and I grew up in a rough place, but I thought, we're going to have a rumble on Marathon Hill? So we got up the hill. In those days, of course, we always went for Baba's darshan first. There was no line of hours to wait. So we went and had Baba's darshan, walked up onto the stage where these two guys were sleeping. Eriko bent over, tapped one of the guys on the shoulder and said, "You're going to have to leave now." The guy out of his blanket said, "Oh, please help me. I don't know what happened. I don't know. I'm really sick. Could somebody help me to a rickshaw? I gotta get out of here." And that was it. I called the curse of the Jessamine. Didn't have to do anything. Just had a kiss for marriage. But it was a good example of how fearless the Mandali were, and how experienced they were at dealing with these kind of people. That story. Does anybody have any questions? No?
Yes.
You want to tell the chemical factory chemist story?
Yeah, it's a long story, but you know, the short, no great drama, but on the road to Marizad, which is always in some kind of in the middle of some kind of an issue. We have another issue, we're waiting to see what's going to happen with that. It's still going on for a couple of years. That approach road there, somebody bought some of the property, put a chemical plant up, which was toxic and making people ill in the area, including some of the effects of Mandali had. We're getting some of these effects. He was asked to not do this. He was arrogant. He went on doing, saying these things, doing whatever. And some of the people said, "We should get this one and we should get that one." And the man Bob will deal with it. And eventually the man, somehow, he lost everything, went bankrupt, went to jail, became sick and died, and something happened. That was the story of that, in a nutshell. People don't understand what's happening.
Do you play with fire?
That's right. Though Baba tolerated a lot in his life, he would purposely tolerate things. He would purposely create situations so that he could take things upon himself. From the very beginning, you know, Baba started these phases of work. Originally, Baba began working with gathering those people who were his circle. It is to say for any perfect master that the first responsibility lies in the realization of the circle members. You have to do that first. Simultaneously, other work is always done. We have a habit as ordinary humans of thinking compartmentally because it's easy for us to think intellectually by being compartmentalized. But remember, Baba is doing things simultaneously, and at the same time, certain things must fall in place in the critical path before the work in general proceeds. So the circle, it's necessary to complete that work with the circle early in the Advent. As we talked about yesterday, he did this work with the boys. He started working with children at Maribad before he started silence. But the culmination of his work with youth was the Prem Ashram that came out of the Meher Ashram. Hazrat Babajan School happened first. His work with children started with the poor Arangan children in the Gamela Yoga days. During the first long stay, which began in 1925, Baba started the Hazrat Babajan School. And it was the Hazrat Babajan School that Baba started this idea of spiritual training along with education. One of the main things Baba did during the first long stay was to deal with this issue of casteism and classism. He tolerated it first for some time and gradually allowed the dramas to play out. But within days before the end of the first long stay, it was all over. From that point, anybody who stayed with Meher Baba had to be willing to do anything. Of course, Baba wouldn't make people do work they weren't suited for, couldn't do, but they had to be willing to do anything. Everybody would drink the same water, eat the same food from that time. So when they returned a month later, that specifically beginning in early 1927, Baba focused on this plan for Meharashram, which was now the new school, the new boarding school plan with an emphasis on spiritual training. And often he would remind the teachers, many of whom were Mandali, that this whole thing about education was just an enticement. And in free education and boarding and all that was just an enticement. And those who were connected would come and get the spiritual training that he wanted to give them. Out of Meher Ashram came Prem Ashram. Incredible stories from that time. Simultaneously, Baba had done the writing of the book, and during the first long stay, he gave many discourses through writing. That book we have, In God's Hand, that was published, is very important for one reason specifically, and that is that it is the only example we have of a discourse given by Meher Baba during that 17-month period when he communicated by writing. The only example we have left. It happened to still be there. Because it was in the body of work called Intelligence Notebooks, we know that it was part of those discourses. Going through the history, I surmise that most likely that discourse was given on August 20th, 1925. If you've seen that, if you've seen what has come to be known as Intelligence Notebooks, Infinite Intelligence, you could see the material that Baba was given in that period. It's quite amazing. Quite amazing. This discourse, whatever it is, 39 pages long, handwritten, is about given in about 3 hours, like that. There's a continuous flow. The material is incredibly deep. There's no doubt who wrote that. It's in his hand anyway. But how astounding the depth that's pouring forth. Once Baba began silence, and he's of course continuing his habit of fasting, occasionally in seclusion, all of this is pouring forth from him. That went on. He started traveling around the world, contacting people all around. All of these phases of work in Baba's life and activity are occasionally interrupted by phases of deep internal work to engage that into his universal work, which were those phases of seclusion, sometimes very long, sometimes short, in specific places around the world, but mostly in India. Question?
Yeah. I was intrigued by the alphabet forms. I can't imagine how, when you saw on the film,
Yes.
it looked like bubbles. I couldn't
Yes,
imagine how
and-
it was being read. And people may not know. Was the reporter really?
Yeah, and some people were very good at it.
But the reporter.
Jal, Money, Adi, Marriage, but they were very good. They could read it across the room upside down.
Which means like heard of those people in
Yeah.
the film clips.
But yeah, the
Yes.
film clip, the reporter who was seemed to
Yes.
be saying it as Bob was reading
Right.
it. I couldn't imagine how he possibly could have done it.
Well, I believe that he had been briefed on the message before. What was the date of that? April 8th, 1932, I think. In the garden behind Katie's Russell Road. So all these phases of work continued. The alphabet board came into existence not long after Baba stopped writing, during the first week of January 1927. what happened is Baba was communicating first by pointing to letters on the newspaper. And so Vishnu took some of those big letters and pasted them on a piece of cardboard. And then that's how it began. It was very natural. Baba was already very expressive through his gestures. But,
How long did you keep the alphabet book?
and the alphabet board was used until October 7th, 1954. That message that we use in the film God in Human Form, the last message, is from that day. It was 1 week exactly after Baba's final declaration. The final declaration is probably the most dramatic message that Baba ever gave. It is largely ignored because it has the points about world destruction and all that, which in the clarification Baba gave 40 days later, said that was all in his own language. What does that mean? So people said, oh, you see, he's just, at the time, I said, well, he got us all riled up, and now he's just, for his own reasons. It's true, no doubt. When Bob would have these meetings, the New Life meetings were a good example, he would create a mental atmosphere by impressing upon them that there was a great specific purpose, and they must take it all very seriously. It was like this when he would have repeated meetings and say, now, next year for sure, I'm breaking my silence. And I asked Eric once, Bob has said this so many times, you all must have by the end, he must have said, yeah, all right, whatever. He said, no, he had a way of making you believe it. There was a specific purpose. My conjecture is several things, we'll get into that, because silence in itself is an incredible issue. It is the main feature, let's say, the main tool in the Avatar's toolbox in this advent. Keeping silence and what that means. Tremendous thing. But the final declaration, world destruction, stabbed in the back, and talked about in the introduction to the meeting. People were, it was a very dramatic meeting. It was a great effect. Yes?
That was towards the end of the New Life.
That was
Came out for the-
September 30th, 1954 at Narabad. It was the end of the 3 incredible weeks, Western and Sahavas, that happened at Narabad.
What about when he came out of the New Life for a day? Wasn't it?
That was October 16th, 1951. 1950, not 51. October 16th, 51 was the beginning of the Manamash. October 16th, 1950 was stepping out of the New Life for 1 day, where he gave that message called his sermon. It was a Mahabaleshwar, so he said, well, this is my sermon on the mount. Mahabaleshwar is a mountain hill station. There are so many incidents in Meher Baba's life. I'm trying to give you kind of an overview, because in our lives with the Manali, we imagine this wall as a huge mural, and our lives with the Manali was like looking at a square inch at a time. Yeah, we were here, and then this happened, and this, and then you go and look at another square inch. And you do that for years, and you think, where are we? But, so, in remembering, contemplating Baba's life and work, it's like stepping back and looking at the mural, trying to see what the whole thing represents. It's quite deep. Yes?
Peter, I wanted to ask you, how do you, in your work, doing this, how do you not get overwhelmed? I mean, how do you keep moving ahead in your focus, like you're going to go to the, Windsor Castle Museum?
Well, I only have half a mind in it.
Okay, I don't mean that, but how do you
several years, I've been working off and on a script about Mehrabad. For those of us who spend a lot of time there over the years, we see more and more people coming who have no idea what the place is. And if you wanted to have one place in the world associated with Mehrabad, it has to be Mehrabad. Its tomb is. The layers of history in all the different sites, and the incredible depth of meaning concerning all the work that he did there. Why it will be, as he said, the New Jerusalem of the world. I will say, at first, I tried to keep it concise and abandon the idea. I have gone back through the years to flesh it out more. There are too many good stories that really, how can you pass up a good story? They're not just stories, they have such depth. The real things that happen there. So I'm trying to include that, but I'm at about 168,000 words, and I'm not completely up to the beginning of the new one. Into those meetings. So it's going to be, I figure, potentially 16 hours, maybe 20 hours, in at least a dozen parts, documentary film. The challenge is going to be dealing with the visual images. We can do narration, we can do music. The visual images are going to take some work. We don't have that many photographs of the early days, but we can do animated images, generated images, some animation, not of human figures, but of early buildings and landscapes of Mehrabad. Because if you take 1 year, 1925, so much development and change, I have to show that stages. I would really like to be able to present an accurate picture of history as far as possible. There are going to be things we leave out, but it's going to be quite in-depth in general. The challenge is to present a balanced picture. Many people spend a lot of time at Mehrabad on the women's side, have a very, called a women-mindedly centered point of view of the history. A lot of the early history of the men can only be appreciated through the early diaries now, unless you knew many of the old characters that some of the older ones of us have met, spent time with. I realized at a certain point that the responsibility of our generation is to capture and protect context. Crucial. Crucial. This is, our generation is what can prevent the loss of a lot of information that gives meaning to artifacts. Artifacts become legend if you don't protect the provenance of all of that, which means all the context. Why is this important? Things must have given Bob. They're in the museum there. Why is that important? What's the history? So it's a great treasure that we have so much recorded history about Bob. And we do have good commentary from those who were with him at the time. A lot of this meaning to Baba's stuff came after he dropped his body, and the period of contemplation and reflection started more. While Baba was alive, the Mandali were preoccupied with what does he want next. No doubt it was the work of some of them as scribes, Vishnu in the early days, Chanji, to protect the material, to make sure it was safe, so the record was safe. But infinite intelligence came out of the intelligence notebooks, which were recorded and edited in long form outline by Vishnu. No signing, Manli never did this, I do this and whatever, only we have that in the combined diaries from the copyist, who was Ramju. But Ramju never says I was the copyist. We only recognize that because of his hand. We only recognize Vishnu because of his hand being the copyist for the intelligence notebooks. But at first they didn't believe it because Vishnu didn't speak Farsi, and some of it is written by Farsi. When I discussed this with Baron, I said, why do you think that the same person wrote the Farsi as he wrote the English and translated the Gujarati and all that? Did that? No, it must have been one person. But then I came across one single note in a diary. You never guess it unless you know. The note in the diary was simply, Baba told so-and-so to turn nose over to Vishnu and Gakushra, sorry. There. That's got to be it. The time is right, and that's the clue. I can't say definitively, because I'm not a handwriting expert qualified by the such and such and whatever, as I can't say definitively that is Gauri Shah, but through logical deduction, I'm quite sure of those things. And that's all I can do. Kind of try and steer people in the right direction when I have a hunch about them. Just like that. But certain people, like David Finster, had good fortune, didn't have to work, spent his whole adult life immediately lived in India and just put his nose into it. He just does the same thing every day. It's just information about it. He's quite amazing as a detective. I've been sitting with him, we'll talk about, what about that thing and that thing? He calls it Hong Kong, and then he gets on the computer or something, and somebody sends him a postcard with some obscure thing. It's quite amazing. I respect that. Any other questions? People on?
Did any of the Mandali who were living at Maribor, like Padre when you guys first moved out there, or other people, tell you anything about why Baba chose to keep Muhammad at Maribor?
No, but we were really happy. When we were living there, it was like, look at this.
Can you repeat the question?
The question was, did any of the old people, like Padre, tell us why Muhammad was kept at Maribor? Well, there were a couple of old musts that were kept at Maribor. First of all, Baba had several what we call must ashrams around India. Bangalore was probably the largest collection. Mahabaleshwar was important. Others were not as active. Maribor was not a big must ashram place, but the only surviving example we have of one of Baba's must ashrams is the compound on the hill that was placed around the building that was originally a maternity hospital, built in the big reconstruction of Upper Maribor in 1938. Muhammad was one of the earliest musts that was brought to Baba, 1936 by Peter from Bombay, when Baba's intention was to start the Mad Ashram. It was mostly after God Mad at the time. Though some ordinary, insane people were brought, and Baba would work with them for a day and then send them away because that wasn't his focus. Would help them, would help the whole, I'm sure, through these archetypal personalities, the whole world of mental illness. But he was really after helping those who were slightly advanced. So the God Man, as he explained, different types of God Man, those on the lower planes. Yoga Brashta, for example, he said Yoga Brashta is a term of a person who becomes unbalanced through past efforts to advance in yoga, and their experience caused them to be unbalanced, but they do advance. So we work with this type of persons. Some authentic musts came during that first man ashram at Rohuri. Muhammad was the first one. He stayed with Baba through the years, Through those first years, Baba kept him with the Mandali in the ashram. He was sent back at one point to stay with Oliva. Oliva was not living as the Mandali then, but Oliva was one of the Mayor Ashram boys who reconnected with Baba in 1936-37, and Baba told him, "Yeah, you come and see me once a month. You're welcome to." So he would do that. And on one of these trips, Baba told Oliva, "I'm going to send Muhammad with you to Bombay. You keep him with you for a while. He wants to go back there for a while." And so Oliva was taking care of Muhammad, who was doing his same antics, there was one toilet on the floor, and he would lock himself in there, and all the other tenants would came to use it, and then he'd be shouting and swearing at Oliva, and Oliva wouldn't do it. And after some months, Oliva actually wept, "Please, Baba, take him back, I can't." So, beginning of 1942, Baba brought Muhammad back to Mehrabad and had him housed back in the ashram on the hill where you see that sheet metal barricade around there. That was the Must ashram. By the time Kaikabad and his family came to live with Baba, Kaikabad's wife and daughters were put in those quarters, and the remaining musts, were either sent home by that time. Muhammad was brought down the hill. And at the same time, Baba started working with the Must Ali Shah, Babji, who's also buried in Mehrabad, who moved from Ahmed. He lived in Ahmednagar. He came to Ahmednagar the same year Baba came to Mehrabad for the first time and began staying there. And Baba engaged him in the work in the 40s. He was the most faithful of all the Musts to work for Baba whenever called upon. Because he was pure Jamali, though, Baba said, he's not suitable for all the work. That mild, sluggish temperament of the Jamali Must is only good for certain things, but sometimes he needed a real Jamali Must. And Muhammad would fit that role sometimes. So whatever the work was, whatever Baba wanted to do, he would call on these Musts who were lodged in certain conditions, in certain places in the spiritual realm. However they were appropriate, he would use them. So this is why we have the two Musts who have their graves at Mehrabad with the other men Mandali. It was quite amazing for us to have a real life Must at Mehrabad. And he obviously was, I've had experiences, others have had experiences, but I can tell you I watched him not eat for about 9 months. It's not like I'm going to fast, watch this, nothing like that. It was just a state of spiritual desperation was such that he couldn't possibly eat. Padre would have to coax him to take water. He looked like he was going to die for months, but he wouldn't. He would. Bitten by a mad dog during the same time. It's incredible. They suffer. Anyway, it was quite amazing to see that example. These are the people who have the authority. Our inherent problem is that we have no real subjective spiritual experience. Anybody can say, I'm God, yeah, okay, whatever. Anybody can say, I believe he's God. It doesn't mean anything. Bob will say this himself, but the difference with these Musts is that they had the sight, the experience, the subjective experience, and through them, we can objectively base our conviction on their subjective experience. Because undoubtedly they're not ordinary. There are many examples. This book, The Wayfarers, is tremendous. And that is written by our English disciple, Dr. William Duncan, a highly qualified person. Beautifully done. Love his kind of archaic style. And Baba got that out of him because he observed things that were happening since he came to live in the ashram, and Baba's worked with monks around India. And one day he said, I've read a lot, I've never seen anything like this work. It is quite unique. Somebody should chronicle this and write about it, present it. Baba said, good idea, you're the man. You got it. And the way Baba got the most out of him is that every time Baba would say, read, what have you done? So he would read something and he would tell him, dry. It's dry. Right? Because of that, we have these incredibly colorful descriptions of life of Baba. Yet, he didn't tell all of the shocking details of some of the must contacts.
Do you want to?
You want one?
Yes.
So, Baba contacted maybe 4 or 5 ghost-like spiritually advanced persons. I'm over time.
No, you're fine.
Okay, we've adjusted the whole,
You're fine.
you're fine.
Okay.
One story.
I know, it doesn't make a lot of sense that anymore because I can't herd cats.
We're still doing.
We're just eliminating, we're eliminating supper.
You don't want to hear about that.
No, we do.
Tell the story.
I'm teasing.
Okay, so I'll tell this one last story.
You mean goose or gouse? Must.
Goose is a different thing.
Right.
Gauss is the term.
Yeah. Explain.
This is a rare side effect in spirit. Some spiritual personalities have this quality, which is what? Their bodies dislocate at certain times when they're in certain specific spiritual experiences. Sai Baba was like this. There was a specific order, the story with Sai Baba, there was a specific order, nobody should look at him, where he was in the night. One man was curious as to why, so he peeked in and saw Sai Baba in a ghost-like state. His body would be on this plank, hanging by some rags, arms in one place, head on a brick, side, legs somewhere else. And the man immediately went blind. So his last visual memory was seeing Sai Baba in a ghost-like state.
A house like this, like this.
Apart, ghost-like. So, when they were in South India, in 1939-40, whatever it was, Baba would do these very rigorous must tours. And the disciples he would send out for must would go through this routine of struggle and meager accommodations. Once Baba said to them, who? Erich and Kaka, there's a must in Tangier I want you to go and find. His name was Abdul Qadir Jilani, which is also the name of one of the early Sufi Qutubs, perfect master, who lived in Baghdad. He had the same name. They went there. There was a butcher shop there. Excuse me, we're looking for this man. He's supposed to live near here. Yeah, he lives in that tent next door. It's a hollow tent, simple thing. So they went out. No answer. They opened the flap of the tent, went inside and saw this body dismembered there. Looked at each other, didn't say a word. Walked straight out, got on the bus. When Erich would tell stories, he was a great storyteller, he would pass the time. Well, you know, the mind started working. I don't mind. It looks like now we'll be implicated for this murder. I don't mind. I'll spend the rest of my life in prison. But it shouldn't involve Baba. What are we going to do with that problem? I'm thinking like this all the way back. They got back to Baba, and Baba said, yeah. Did you find it? Did you see it? We saw something. Baba said, you saw it? You saw it? We saw a murder. Baba said, you didn't see a murder, you saw him. You're really very fortunate. It's such an incredibly rare sight. Only because you're under my protection. Nothing can happen to you. It's dangerous to see that sight. So of course, all of us young there, what was it like? I would ask, were there flies in there? No, very clean environment. Was there blood? No blood. Well, was it a cut? He said, you know those dolls where you have the plastic arms and they have a joint? Well, it kind of looked like that. The joint was all neat and clean. Pink flesh, he said, pink. Nice and fresh pink. Baba sent them back the next day to give him an apple. He was sitting on the porch of the butcher shop laughing at them. He wasn't informed who they came from. They gave him the apple and he just said, Meherba. How could a surgeon write this in Wayfarers? He would have been excommunicated from the society of orthopedic surgeons. So that's one of the stories, fascinating stories that are unpublished but told to us. Okay, well, back.
So, before supper, we're going to show you Alone Exists, but these two works in collaboration were both involved, and I think it would be great if you could say something jointly. Are you going to show it now?
Sure.
So, yeah, just to introduce. I'll do the very short thing, and then.
Okay, great. Just a brief introduction from my point of view of You Alone Exist, all right? My work is primarily to look at Baba's words or Francis's words or Malcolm Schloss's words and put, if I'm drawn into it, is to put it to music. And generally, you see a poem by Francis Brabazon. Generally, it rhymes. Generally, it's 20 lines or less. It's a fairly simple thing. So one day, I'm reading a book by Bao called While the World Slept, and in the beginning of this book is this very enormously long poem called You Alone Exist. And reading it, Baoji says that Baba started to give him these couplets, then he would ask Bao to write some couplets, and then Baba, sometime later, finished the poem. And the poem was extremely complicated and very long. And I was looking at it when I read the book, and I said, oh, this would be impossible to put into a song. And as I'm looking at it, in a non-intellectual way, I saw how it could be put into a song immediately, within 5 minutes. And interestingly enough, you may not remember this. I got on the phone and I called Debbie Nordine.
Oh.
You may not remember this. And I sang, I said, listen, I just put this song, this poem to music. It's about 25 minutes long, and it's, You Alone Exist, and I sang her a couple of couplets to show, just because she's a musician, and I said, isn't that interesting how that formed? And she said, yeah, it was really great, what are you going to do with it? So, sometime later, within 6 months, at a Baba meeting in Asheville, I decided, what the heck, I'm going to sing this song. I rarely sing it. I won't be able to sing it to you. You'll hear it sung by me in a recording. But I sang it at a Baba meeting, and after it was done, Peter came up to me and said, we should put that into a video. So now I'm going to tell you, because I didn't have anything to do with putting it into the video. All right? I just was a conduit to put it in. Oh, and by the way, the reason I put it into music was Bauji, in his talking about the process between him and Mayor Baba writing this poem, Bao was a little concerned about some of the images that Mayor Baba was giving him. Because Baba said, you know, you're a scorpion, you are an ant, you're a snake, and you alone exist. And Bao said, well, we can't, you know. And Baba said, don't worry about it. One day, this will be sung in every home in the world. Something like that. So I'm looking at it thinking, oh, this is supposed to be a song. So that's what got me interested. Unbeknownst to me, Mani, Baba's sister, had already put it to music. I've just never heard, I've never heard it. And somebody else in Australia, what's his name? Sam Saunders put it to music. So I'm not saying that my version is going to be sung in every house, you know, in the future. And I won't be around to hear it anyway, so it doesn't make any difference. So I'm going to tell, now Peter will tell you how it went to video.
Thanks, Jim.
Just a little more background history of that. What happened is, you know, Baba is the one who encouraged Bao to start writing. What happened is, after Francis had compiled all of these stories, and the book, everything, little booklet, everything and the nothing was done, Baba liked it, and he said, you do the Hindi translation. Okay, fair enough. He said, but you know, here in India, the people want more. So add a play, add a prayer that can be sung. Remembered that Baba had dictated the first verse to him in 1959, so based upon that, he had composed the 11, and then the rest of the verses that Jim described were composed.
By Baba.
By Baba. He wanted to make sure that people would have an understanding of the all-pervading nature of God in every little thing. So when we did this project, we wanted it to be directed but playful. And when Jim first sang that, all these images of the appropriate footage were going through my mind, and that's why after a meeting I thought, we've got to do a video project. This is really fun.
So I I recorded it at a studio with this guy, Too Tall Tom DeMock, who's a hippie from New Jersey in America, who moved within 20 miles of where I live, a complete genius with a recording studio that Baba hooked me up with. And he and I do all the music together. I do all the multiple vocals on this. I play some of the instruments, and he plays the rest of the instruments, okay? So then I presented the finished audio.
And we took it to India, and again we edited. Bob Fredericks, by the way, is the film editor on these couple of projects. So we had greatly enjoyed the process.
Thanks.
That's last.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Just going to do curtains.